Hey there and welcome to No Recipe Required. Hope you're doing well. Tonight I'm going to do a braised short rib for you. Now short ribs, I never saw them as a kid, I never had them as a kid, but increasingly I've seen them in restaurants over the years. It's the kind of the cheap cut of meat that restaurants are trying to elevate and really create something special, and you know what, they can. It's a super tough piece of meat, but with the right treatment, like braising, it really gets nice and tender. And along with that toughness is a ton of natural flavor that we enhance with awesome braising liquid, some vegetables in there, a little bit of wine. It's absolutely spectacular. I'm going to serve mine with a little bit of celery root puree, which is kind of just a takeoff on mashed potatoes. And the combo is awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we've got a couple short ribs. Now, short ribs, they come kind of a meat side. This is a nice little plate of meat. And then about an inch and a half of meat. Some are bigger than others. They are absolutely awesome when we braise them like this. And only thing you really want to do, just bring them up to room temperature, close to room temperature, and then season with salt and pepper. And we're going to sear them off. That's super important to start off with. It really helps develop the flavor in the ultimate. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our braise. Now, first thing we're going to do, and this is with most braises, certainly not with every single one, is sear off the meat. So these are the short ribs. They have, like I said, the bone side. They've got the meat side. I'm going to put the meat side down into a pan that is over medium-high heat. A little bit of olive oil in there, and I'm just going to let that meat sear on that one side, get nice and caramelized, golden brown. Flip them over. We're going to do all our sides and really develop the the caramelization of the meat, which is going to give us a ton of flavor in the final braise. Okay, I've got these short ribs now, nicely caramelized all the way around. Next thing we're going to do is add some vegetables. I've got the standard mirepoix, carrot, onion, celery, with everything just kind of coarsely chopped. Doesn't really have to be all that nice and neat. I've also got, I think, 3 or 4 garlic cloves that I've just crushed. Haven't even chopped them up. The idea is to get some vegetables in there, soften them up a little bit here, so that as the meat braises, it just sucks all that flavor out of the vegetables into the braising liquid, which then goes into the meat. Okay, after our vegetables have just softened up a little bit, gotten just a little tiny bit of caramelization on them. You don't really need a ton. We're going to add a little bit of red wine. Now, braising, you can add almost any type of liquid. Here we're using red wine because we're using obviously short ribs, and red wine, red meat just goes super well together. I'm going to go about halfway up the pot. That was probably a cup and a half of red wine in there, and I'm just going to let it come to a heavy simmer and reduce down. Let some of that wininess, a little bit of the alcohol, cook off and evaporate. Then we're going to come back and add chicken stock to the liquid as well. After wine a chance to reduce down, I'm going to supplement my liquid with a little bit of chicken stock, probably about an equal amount. And notice I've got most of the meat covered, but not quite all of it, which is generally pretty standard with a braise. And I'm going to add a couple herbs. Actually, I'm just going to add one real kind of herb, which is a little bit of herb de Provence, which is a mixture of herbs. You can obviously use whatever you want. This is a nice little mix, so it's easy to do. And I'm going to add in a bay leaf, because bay leaves are really good when you're doing long stews like this. And I'm going to adjust the heat so that the meat just simmers, or the liquid just barely comes up to a simmer. And then we're going to cover it like so, and just let it sit for probably 2 hours on low temperature. That low wet cooking is really going to soften up, tenderize the meat. Okay, my short ribs have been braising for about an hour, and after we added the chicken stock, and I don't know if you can see, you probably see the bubbles there. That's kind of the temperature we want, just barely on. Now, if you come in and you give that braising liquid just a little taste, you're going to find It tastes rotten. But that is totally fine. It's supposed to taste rotten at this stage. It needs time to kind of develop the flavors, the wine to mute down, the beef flavor to really come out. I do want you to notice a couple things though that are important. So here, the meat is still fairly tough. It's going to need, like I said, another hour and a half or so, maybe even longer, to really get fork tender. That's what you're looking for. And then the other thing you may want to notice when you taste the sauce is salt content. Too salty or not, you can adjust it from there. I'm just going to let this go covered. You can forget about it. We'll come back in about another hour. Okay, so this big, ugly, dirty looking thing is a celery root. I'm going to show you how to clean it. First, remove the top. Celery root, literally, the root of a celery plant. And the inside is kind of like a potato with a little bit of celery flavor to it. Remove the top, remove the bottom. And frankly, they're pretty dirty. You can see that. We're gonna end up rinsing it off when we're done peeling it. So don't worry too much about the dirt. And we're gonna kind of just, you could, I guess, in theory, use a potato peeler, but the outside is just so kind of thick and I don't know, kind of tangled together that it really just makes sense to just use the knife and go, start in at an angle like that. And as you go down and around, just move the knife to take off that outside layer, which is absolutely no good. You're going to probably lose, a good quarter inch from all around, but that's totally fine. And then you get all the way around, clean up the bottom a little bit more in places, and then you can, essentially you can just cut this up now and treat it a lot like a potato. Okay, so here is our celery root that I've got, I just rinsed off. And if you got, little bits of vein like that, go ahead and just, take them off. They only go so deep. You don't really want them in your celery root puree. So we'll take those guys off, and then we just chop it up as you would a potato. Let me just wipe my knife off there. Into little cubes that we are going to boil off right along with our potatoes. About, what is that, inch by inch, and then throw them in a pot of nice room temperature water. Nice water, make sure the water's nice. And then I've got my potato here. I like to go, probably 50-50, maybe a little bit less potato. Chop these guys up, and then we'll just put them on the stove, on the heat, just like we normally do. Bring everything up to a simmer, and then let it go until everything is tender. Okay, so just like mashed potatoes, we do the knife test to tell when our potatoes and celery root are done. These are looking pretty good. So we're going to go drain them and then bring them over to our food processor. Okay, let's get our potatoes and celery root that are drained into our food processor. And this is just like making mashed potatoes. We're going to, although frankly I don't usually use the food processor for mashed potatoes, but we're going to add a little bit of butter, probably about 2 tablespoons, and a little bit of cream. Again, about the same amount. You can always add a little bit more butter and cream. Good pinch of salt because potatoes can use the seasoning. Some pepper. And then we're going to add the top and give it a few pulses to start mixing everything together. Okay, after 4 or 5 pulses, I just hold down the blender or the food processor, let it go. Oops. Then we're going to give everything a little bit of a taste. This one, it's really good. It could use just a touch more salt and pepper. I think the cream and butter are okay. If you want smoother, creamier, add more cream, add more butter. If you want kind of the healthier version, you could even throw a little bit of olive oil in there. It'd be absolutely awesome. Just mix that last little bit in, and then we are good to go. with our celery root puree. Okay, so it's been a good 3 hours. And I've got my 2 little tiny short ribs just braising away. Now's the time I'm looking for though. I can use a fork, I can just pull the meat apart. It is absolutely perfectly tender. Even one of them, you know, the bone fell out. No problem at all when I serve them. I'm actually going to remove the bone from the other one as well. Because, you know, frankly, how are you going to eat that when it's dropped on your plate? So what we're going to do, I'm going to remove them from the pan, and we're going to make a little bit of a sauce, kind of a glaze, with this the braising liquid for some extra flavor. So I have drained off my braising liquid. Just ran it through a strainer, removed all the solids. This is what I've got. And then I've got a little pan here on the heat. I'm going to add about half a cup to that pan. And I'm just going to reduce this down and essentially form our sauce. You know, this braising liquid has a ton of flavor in it, and to let it go to waste would be just a crying shame. To that, though, I'm going to add just a pinch of brown sugar for some sweetness, and that's going to help, you know, kind of thicken the sauce once it reduces down, make it nice and sweet, delicious. Bit of an extra step. You know, you don't need to do this if you want to just serve the meat with a little bit of this natural juice around it. You absolutely can, but I think this is a great way to boost up some flavor. Okay, I've got our braising liquid reducing down, and these are our short ribs. Now this is the one where the bone fell off, and that little flap down here, not real edible stuff, not super delicious. So we're going to remove that. This is, you know, it's optional. You could absolutely just serve it like this, but if I want to make it a nice, pretty, neat presentation, then I'll go ahead and just take a little knife and go right around that flap, and it comes off pretty easily. Here's the bone, here's the flap. On this guy here, we've got the flap. We'll take that off as well. And then we've got 2 pieces here. Now, I'm going to serve these, you know, 1, 2 is kind of appetizer portions. You can certainly do main courses. You know, add them together, put 2 on a plate, do a main course. What I'm going to do though is just glaze them with that sauce that we've got, throw them in a broiler and get nice crispy crust edges on them. Okay, so here we've got a little bit of cornstarch. I'm going to show you how we can use cornstarch to thicken up a sauce. So I've got my liquid here in the pan. Now it doesn't really matter what you're using. You can use water, you can use milk, you can use orange juice, you can use broth, you can use whatever. The point is you got a little bit of cornstarch and a little bit of water to form a bit of a paste here. And once you mix this together, we can essentially add this back to our sauce, and that is going to thicken it up when we want it to. I'm going to let this just reduce down naturally on its own, and we'll come back and put it all together. Okay, here is our sauce that I want to thicken. I've reduced it down to where I want it. And I've got our little cornstarch. Call this a slurry, cornstarch and liquid. And I'm just going to add maybe a little bit and stir it in. And almost immediately, it's going to thicken up, get a little bit glossy. I do want to bring it to a boil because that's going to show the full thickening power of it. And you know, for this recipe, I'm looking for kind of a syrupy consistency. So something, you know, kind of thick, that will actually glaze on the meat. I'm going to add just a drizzle more. And this is a great way to thicken a sauce. I think we've got what we're looking for. Okay, so here I've just got a little plate I can put in the oven, and we're going to glaze our short ribs. I'm going to lay it just right there, right in the middle, right there, right in the middle. We just thickened our sauce. And I'm going to just drizzle that guy right over the top. I'm going to reserve a little bit more of the sauce to serve along with the short rib and our celery root puree. Let's go ahead. I'm going to pop this into a oven that's on a high broil and just get a nice crust on the top. Okay, once you get a nice sizzling little top like that, that's when you want to pull it out. We're going to go ahead and serve up our short rib. Alright, let's go ahead and serve up our meal tonight. I've got a little bit of celery root puree. obviously mixed with a little bit of potato, is absolutely awesome. We're going to spoon that in the middle of our dish. And then we're going to serve that along with our braised short rib, which is absolutely tender, fork tender, beautiful, delicious. You want to get some, if you want to get some vegetables from the braising liquid around that, it would absolutely work wonderfully. I've got a little bit of extra sauce here that I'm just going to drizzle right around the edge. A little more flavor. And this is going to be an absolutely killer dish. Wipe up our side. I will see you next time on No Recipe Required.